Hello, slingers. Welcome to the Wordslinger podcast. I'm glad to have you here. I think you're going to enjoy today's interview, so make sure you stick around. See you soon.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Well, I am J. Kevin Tumlinson, Wordslinger. I bill myself a lot lately as the writer, which I know is maybe that's a little pretentious. But I do it on purpose, and I'm very intentional about why I'm doing it. And in fact, it's not just the writer, it's the writer underscore, and that little underscore is actually supposed to be a blinking cursor, sort of my logo, I guess, now. That's what it's become. But there's a reason I refer to myself as the writer, because writing is such a huge part of my life and everything that I do. My entire career, no matter what job I had, writing was, as I refer to it, it was the through line of all that work. And so as a result of that, I've done a lot of work with the writing and publishing industry over the years, and have become somewhat well known in those industries. But here's the thing. I love writers. I love chatting with fellow writers. I love figuring out ways to help writers do the things they do. I'm just, writing is just such a huge, impactful part of my life. And so I know it can be a huge, impactful part of the lives of others. And I'm always interested in talking to people who are figuring out ways to kind of touch the soul of a reader through words. And it's kind of fascinating that, we have this tool that's effectively telepathy. Because I have a thought, and that thought causes me to, move my hands in some way. Either I pick up a pen and I write on a piece of paper, or I put my fingers on a keyboard and I start typing, and that thought becomes a thing, a physical thing, a digital thing, and then that thing goes out and conveys that thought into the mind of another person. That is that's some serious mystic voodoo right there, man. So, but anyway, that has nothing at all to do with today's guest, except that she is in this club of writers and people that I respect because of the work they choose to do. I'm talking to Cristina LePort, Dr. Cristina LePort, Cristina LePort, MD, and she's, this was a fascinating interview. I always love talking to writers, but in particular, I love talking to writers who have sort of an inside track on something, kind of gives them a little bit of an edge in a specific type of thriller. She writes, of course, medical thrillers and a political thriller, and she gets to come at this from a very interesting perspective. So very happy to have this chat. I won't keep you from it. Let's dive right in. Make sure you stick around after for the note at the end, because I'm always sure to say something interesting at that point. So I'll see you there. Well, welcome, and thank you for sticking around after the intro. And I love talking to authors. As an author myself, as someone who's worked with a lot of authors over the years, I can never run out of interesting authors to meet. It just doesn't seem to happen. And that's certainly the case with today's author. She is, this is a multi-book author, and she is an MD on top of things. We're talking to Cristina LePort, MD, Dr. Cristina LePort to you, if you're fancy, but just Cristina to us on the show. Hi, Cristina. Thanks for coming on board.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So I love when people from, I hate to say it this way because authors are professionals too, but just for clarity, I love it when people come in from a profession to be an author. I talk to a lot of lawyers who become thriller writers, things like that. Don't talk to so many like medical doctors who come into this. So that's pretty interesting on its own. How long have you been practicing medicine?
Well, I practiced medicine for 45 years,
Okay.
and I just retired to authorhood
Oh,
full
just full time now.
just last year. Yes,
Okay. Wow. So it's
but I
going well.
so
Yeah.
far.
Your first book was Dissection, your first book, or was that?
Well, the first book which got published was
Hmm.
Dissection.
Okay.
I have other books which I actually written before Dissection, which will be published in the next year or so.
Yeah. And the new book is called Change of Heart. It's a it's a medical thriller, right? That's because the previous one was, are they all medical and political thrillers, or is this one just strictly a medical thriller?
The first one was a little bit more political than this one. This
Really?
one is fairly strictly medical, but
Yeah.
you could see something in between the lines
Yeah. Yeah.
if you
What is
wanted
that?
some politics.
Okay, first of all, I'm impressed that two books in, you have a full-time author career. Is that's a good sign. A lot of people would like to have that kind of success. How did that happen? How did you go from, because doctors, we tend to think, culturally, we think of doctors as being wealthy, being able to support themselves pretty well on a medical practice. So it has to it has to tell a story, I guess, that you are
Yes.
now writing full time. How did that progression happen?
Well, writing is kind of a passion. I mean, it became something to do after retirement, which I'm very, very happy I have because I'm passionate about it. Um, but writing was never really a even in my mind until my 40s, until I had practiced medicine for about 20 years and as an internist. When I was in school, like most authors, they tell you, "Oh, I always wanted to write. I always was writing when I was a little girl." It's not me. I hated writing in school. I grew up in Italy, and we had this nightmare that's called the theme, il tema. They give you a theme and you had 2 hours to write something about it. And I just hate it because I wasn't interested in any of the theme or the title they gave us.
Yeah.
And so I never would have imagined I was going to write books at that time. And when I came to the United States after my medical school, just to do my training, I barely spoke English. So again, I never thought I was going to write books in English. And it was after I practiced medicine for internal medicine for about 20 years when you could say I had a midlife crisis. I just wanted to do something different after 20 years of internal medicine. So I wanted to get into cardiology, which was my favorite specialty. And while I was waiting to do that, because it's very difficult to match a program and all that, I started to read other things just to look for different interesting things to do in case I was not going to get into cardiology. And I came across to this little book by Ayn Rand, the author Ayn Rand, that's called The Art of Fiction.
Hmm.
And I was blown away thinking that, geez, if you're an author, you can create a world that you like.
Yeah.
And then you can invent characters that you want to meet. And then you can make anything you want happen. And so for the first time, I said, Jesus, I want to write a novel because it's really you create your world. And sure enough, while I'm writing, I can just start writing and then look and wonder why I'm hungry because it's like 3 hours that I'm sitting there. I just like I go to a different world. So I started about 20 years ago. And first, obviously, I didn't know anything about writing because I never, was trained or anything. So the story was long. I had to hire a writing coach because I was working full time, so I didn't have time to just go to book meetings and things like that. And then little by little, I learned all the technicalities, the first person, third person, and the tags and dialogue, all the
Hmm.
technical stuff.
Yeah.
And then it took me a long time to find an agent and a publisher. And during that time, throughout all the rejections, I just kept on writing. So now I have 4 finished books, which are beside, these two other ones.
Those other two, are they, you're farming those out to agents right now?
No, actually, I'm going to stay with the same agent and the same publisher.
Okay. All right. Very
Worked
good.
out well.
I'm curious about because you were born in Italy, and clearly Italian was your first language.
Yes.
Uh, what was it like writing? Because I assume you wrote these in English, or did you write them and then translate them?
No.
Yeah.
It's funny that you asked that because I wrote them in English. Of course, by then, English was my language, although
Yeah.
I still have a lot of italics when I write, and my husband is the one who corrects all my italics.
Yeah.
So, but like the position of the adjective is a little different and this and that. And I'm driving my publisher crazy when he edits my books because of that. So, but I wrote them in English. I mean, I tried. We actually tried to translate dissection in Italian, and we did it through AI.
Mhm.
And when I read that, it was a disaster. I mean, it wasn't ready for for prime time. And so I had to edit it. And even after I was finished editing, and I'm Italian and I know English, when I brought it to Italy, because I go to Italy, my sister lives there, I have a lot of cousins, and I have a cousin who was a professor of letter, and she read it, she found a lot of problems with
Right.
my Italian. So I could never write a book in Italian at this point. I mean, it would be very difficult. I can speak, obviously, and I can write little things, but not. It's amazing how the technicalities change from one language to another.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I
Yeah,
don't think I've ever quite considered that, and
it is. It is.
yeah,
Like it's very different the way you speak and the way you write in Italian.
really.
Just to give you an example, like when I talk to you, I'm saying io sono andato. I use a past present to talk about yesterday, but when I write, I can't do that. I have to
Mhm.
say I went, not
Yeah.
I had been. I had been like is a spoken language, and so all the verbs are really difficult.
Yeah. That
Italy,
feels challenging. It already feels challenging.
crazy.
And I've had translations of my books, and I have no idea what goes into doing that, because I can't read them. I can't read the translations at all. So
Well,
I just have
somebody
to trust everybody.
does it, right? Right.
So what you're you're writing medical thrillers. That clicks because you are a doctor, but like why the thriller genre in particular? Like what drew you to this genre?
I never had any doubt that if I became an author, I was going to be an author of thrillers.
Hmm.
But medical thriller, I love thrillers all the time. I just love the roller coaster ride, the mystery, and all that. But if you think about it, the medical background for a thriller is really very good because it deals with life or death all the
Hmm.
time. There is the pressure of time. There are a lot of things in common between medicine and medical thriller and writing. There are a lot of qualities in common between a good author and a good doctor. For example, you have to know how to read people. As a
Yeah.
doctor, to make a diagnosis, as a writer, to create characters. And you have to also be able to put together a lot of clues, like when you create a mystery and all that.
Yeah.
And then and at the end, the solution comes, and there is always the pressure of time. And so the medical background, I think I was lucky to have the medical background because I think it's a great backdrop for thrillers.
Yeah. What makes it what would make it a medical thriller specifically? Like what elements go into that to make it a medical thriller?
When a medical thriller is when your background, for example, is the world of doctors and hospital, like
Hmm.
or the mystery is a medical mystery. Into these two books, they have mysteries that you don't know why these things happen, why this in dissection, dissection is a medical catastrophe where your aorta splits open. when these things start to happen, or heart attacks or things like, nobody knows why. So it's like a medical mystery. And in Change of Heart, the background, I picked that name because it's like a little bit of kind of double meaning.
Yeah.
Is a medical transplant. Is the heart transplant is the background. That's why Change of Heart. And to make sure that people didn't think it was a romance, I put that heart right on the cover.
Yeah, this isn't a Valentine
Here is
book.
a thriller, not a romance.
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's
Yeah.
what makes it a medical thriller. It's like in a medical environment, or a medical problem to
Yeah.
solve.
So let's talk a little bit about the book then. What is we know a heart is involved. That much is obvious, but what's the premise of the story?
The premise of the story is that all of a sudden, the number of transplant is increasing in New York.
Hmm.
And not only is increasing, but the donors are mostly people who are a victim of gunshot wounds, which is not unusual for a donor. But there are many more than they should be. And not only that, but these donors shoot themselves in their head, avoiding the medulla oblongata, so the heart keeps them beating. They just destroy their brain.
Hmm.
And to start with, there is a letter that offered the heart for donation. And so it looks like a suicide. And so all these look like suicides. But that's the problem, maybe they're not suicide, or maybe why would these people commit suicide?
Yeah.
It's a premise
Okay.
in order to increase the heart's availability. And then there are little subplot. There is the protagonist is a young woman who's a FBI cyber specialist, a cyber agent, and there is a whole thing that all this problem started when a mobster hacked the medical records of different hospitals. So she's trying to connect those. And while she's doing that, she has some problem with arrhythmias. Her heart is fluttering, and she has to keep all that hidden because otherwise she would have a problem with her career. She has to finish her 3 years to become a real FBI agent.
Hmm.
So, but those are life-threatening. What she says is that she has that conflict. She has to keep on working, and then at the end, everything gets pulled together.
So you've involved the FBI in this then. So how did you research that part of it, like the law enforcement side of it? How'd you
Yeah,
get that data?
it took me a lot of research, and I have done a lot of it also with my first book,
Hmm.
because the medical background part was okay, but again, the political part, or the FBI and everything, I had, of course, to research. It's kind of funny that my husband was afraid the FBI was going to come to the door because, all these
Yeah.
weapons and things like that. And but there is a button you can click if you want to write a book, and then actually some FBI agent will talk to you,
Hmm.
make an appointment or something. But Google also is like, you can Google anything.
Right.
I mean, I had to research how is the training, what do they have to do? It's crazy if you read what they have to do. I mean, to become FBI agents, among
Yeah.
other.
Did you
Uh,
actually, chat with people from the FBI? Did you?
no, I did not, but I read extensively, and I actually knew a couple of people who were part of it, which I had discussed things in the past, but not
Yeah.
specifically for this book. So we had a couple of friends who were like also in this in a CIA or something.
Hmm.
So, but again, the details, when you look at that blank page and you have to write the details, all of a sudden you figure out you don't really know.
Right.
have to go look it up before you put it in writing. One
Right.
thing is just to discuss it with friends, and one thing is to put it in writing for people then to read and to criticize it because
Yeah.
somebody knows what I'm talking about and I don't. It's not a good thing.
Have you gotten feedback at all from people in the FBI or whatever? Has anybody
No,
reached
not
out
from people from FBI.
so far?
No, no,
Yeah.
not yet. Well,
Not
this
yet.
book, is not out yet, so
Right. Yeah.
it's coming
Give it
out in
time.
February. I got a lot of feedback for the other book, which most of it was pretty good, actually. They said I had done pretty good job with the research, the political part,
Yeah.
but I'm
So
waiting for this one.
how long did it take you to produce this book? Have you found that with each book, do you speed up or do you slow down? How is it taking longer or less time per book?
Well, obviously, my first book took forever because I
Yeah.
had to run, I have to learn the technique.
Yeah.
So it took like we went over for 3 years,
Wow.
word for word, just for me to learn how to do the first person, third person, and the tags, the dialogues, all this stuff. But now I master that part, so it's much faster in one sense. Before I start writing, I have to have the whole plot in my head.
Hmm.
Some people tell me that they can just sit down and let the characters do what they feel like doing, but I just can't do that. I have to know exactly uh, what they're going to do and why.
Yeah.
I don't have to have an extensive note or it could be just jotted down, but I have to know. So usually in about a year. It took me a year for this book, but I was still working to some extent.
Yeah.
And then of course started a very long process of editing, which takes time because it goes through several editing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. What the so you're what's the overall process like? When like how do you handle outlining and that sort of thing? What's
yeah,
your process?
my outline is just for me. Like nobody could understand my outline.
Okay.
I don't have a very detailed, extensive outline. I have the story in my head, and I start writing the story, and I should say, well, this is going to be in chapter one. It's going to end this way, and if some dialogue occurs to me, I just jot it down. Oh, this it's nice. They could say this. Wow, and then this would be chapter two, maybe. And this is going to happen. This was going to happen in chapter two, and then I go on like that. And then, of course, things may change eventually. Not that everything's going to stay like that while I'm
Yeah.
actually writing the book. But at least I have to have the climax. I have to have the problem, the solution, and maybe how it's going to happen.
Yeah. I was going to ask how closely do you actually stick to the outline? Like, do you get to a point where, you make a change that's so dramatic you have to outline again, or do you just play it from there?
It's actually funny that you asked that because in Change of Heart, I finished everything. I reread it. I re-edited myself. My husband took out the italics, and then I sent it to a very good editor, and he pointed out to me the protagonist is not in the climax. Excuse
Oh,
me, the
that's
protagonist was
problematic.
in the hospital bed while the things were getting resolved.
Okay.
Well, that part, that obviously is big change from out. Like it's true. I cannot imagine how that happened.
Yeah.
I didn't even occur. I thought to me it really sounded good.
Yeah.
But obviously that was a very major flaw. So I had to rewrite, not the outline, but I had to rewrite that part. I had
Yeah.
wait to put the protagonist in the middle of the climax because it's really a major flaw.
That's really interesting. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I remembered that I had a character I introduced who disappeared, but it's never been the protagonist before.
Well, she wasn't disappeared, but she was sub-inserted inactive
Yeah.
while she had to, usually the protagonist is the action of the protagonist that has a major impact in the climax, if it is
Yeah.
a good. And now it is. I
How do you,
did it much better than I could have imagined because of that criticism.
that's what I was going to ask. Like, how did that change the story for you at that point? Did it?
Beautiful. I, I thought of it because the editor did not tell me what ending or how I should do it. And while I was thinking, I really twisted around and changed it. So it's a
Mhm.
big there, the end,
Yeah.
because that criticism, it just occurred to me how much better could be. It could be with a different ending. So
That
the ending
was that this book, Change of Heart, or was it
of this book,
this one? Okay.
this book.
I almost kind of want to
I have
see
to thank my editor for that one
what
because
you need to do is release the original ending after the book comes out. Release the original ending as like bonus material that people can get on your website.
not as dramatic, not as dramatic.
That's
This
good.
was more dramatic,
You,
much better. And
yeah, you don't want the ending you cut to be better than the ending you went with. So that's
that's
fine.
right. That's right. Yeah.
So you're 4 books in, and I assume you're currently trying to get the other 2 books. Were they written? You said those were written before the 2 that are published. Is that right?
I one that's written, but this is my first book, the one that taught me how to write, basically.
Okay.
And of course, it has undergone many editing. Now that I know everything I know, I re-edited again. The story is still the same, but
Yeah.
the writing obviously is much better. So this is basically a prequel of the series. It comes before Dissection,
Okay.
and Dissection comes, and then Change of Heart.
Interesting.
I also have another book that is independent and is a little bit medical futuristic, and it's called Defrosted. Has to do with people cryogenically
Yeah.
preserved, wake up 200 or 300 years from now because the world is dying and it is the only one who can fix it, this doctor. And then there is a whole mystery. Why did he end up like that, the
Yeah.
world?
That's quite a left turn from the more grounded uh, you know, medical thrillers. That's a Michael Crichton move right there. That's the kind of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
that was my second book. And because I wasn't totally clear, should I do a series or should I just ending and then do something else?
Yeah.
But then I did Dissection, and in Dissection, I kept, you can read it independently. Any of these books is an
Yeah.
independent story. I just kept some of the characters from my first book. And again, in Change of Heart, I took a minor character from Dissection who I really like. I didn't want to let her go, and I made her into the protagonist, that young FBI agent,
Yeah.
with cyber specialist.
Okay. Yeah,
But
that's
anybody can read any of my books first, and they're not going to miss anything.
so what was the deciding factor for going with series over standalones?
That came little by little, is because I didn't want to let go of these characters. I just
Okay.
like I lived with them for so long with my first book, the PI, Kirk Miner, with his family. I just didn't want to let him go. So he's in Dissection. Then in Dissection, I picked up this gruff FBI guy who's cursing and this and that. It's just a kind of a bad, self-centered moron. And
Yeah.
then he has an arc. He ends up like an hero. And so I liked him so much that I kept him. And then there was this younger girl. Some of the readers, they said, I'm ready. By the end of the book, I was ready to hire Bloom. She's so efficient. So I hired her for Change of Heart.
Yeah.
That's how the series came. I just couldn't let go of this character. So I had to have a story that included them.
Okay. But
So
you're
you can read any book. It's not complete. It's not necessary to read them in order. But
Is
the
this going to
character,
be an ongoing series then? Are you going to write more books in the
I
series?
have I have two more in the making with the
Okay.
same guy and some of the same characters.
Okay. All right.
They're not ready yet. Well, these four I mentioned, these two and the other two are already taken by my publisher, and they will come out in between 2025 and 2026.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. It's good to work ahead.
Yeah.
Especially if you went full time. So how did you I mean what was the progression there that what made you decide, okay, I'm done being a doctor and now I'm a full-time writer? Like how'd that work out for you?
After 45 years, the stress kind of is there.
Yeah.
As a doctor, I love my profession.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, the day I actually retired, I felt this weight releasing from my
Yeah.
chest that
Yeah, I
was
bet.
there probably for 45 years. You're responsible for life or death for real.
Yeah.
The one thing I really miss is my patients.
Yeah.
My patients call me and text me, and sometimes they come to book signings, so it's good. Uh, but the work itself, without going in through a lot of other problems that, in my opinion, are, are there now. I don't think there is a connection the way it should be between patients, doctors and patients any longer. Everything
Yeah.
is more personal. There were things that I did not like. They were different when I was younger. But I also was getting older, so I knew sooner or later I had to retire. But the publication of finding an agent, finding a publisher, having these two books accepted, gave me something to really cherish that
Yeah.
I could do after retirement. That's what happened.
Yeah, and you
I
so
happened to have something to do that I really love.
yeah, and obviously your medical background is useful with the type of book you're writing, but have you found, is there anything that you use from your previous career, any skills or any inside knowledge aside from just the medical, obviously it's a medical thriller, so it relies on your medical expertise, but like, is there any other aspect of your former work that has benefited you in writing and publishing?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned briefly before, there is really an overlap on the skills of a
Mm.
doctor and an author. I find that it to be true. Um, um, a doctor is very important for the doctor to know how to read people.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And the same thing, how do you create characters? So you create characters by looking around when you walk up in the street or riding a bus or whatever, and you ask yourself, what is this person? Where does this person come from? In a sense
right,
of what is his goal? And so that's one thing. And then also the meticulous work. Yeah, you have to be very focused. And again, you have to be able to connect a lot of independent um, things, and put them all out of the independent clues and put them into a
yeah,
diagnosis or put them into a story.
yeah.
So I think there are a lot of overlapping in the profession
Did
of
you
the doctor.
are any of the stories, are you just sort of asking what if questions, or did you actually see things that inspired these books?
Both.
Yeah,
Was a dissection, obviously, it was a what if.
yeah.
But change of heart, I have a very good friend who actually inspired one of the protagonists of Dissection, who was a cardiothoracic surgeon. And so he inspired me to write this book with a background of transplant. And
Hmm.
I asked him a lot of questions while I was writing. And so that was an important thing. And then also, our transplant is one of the major the major things that can happen to one of my patients as a cardiologist. So
Right.
I wanted to say, well, why don't I do a book on our transplant? Because there are a lot of ethical issues, conflicts.
Right. I mean, what a double-edged sword. You've got,
Issues.
yeah, it is this, there's this thing happening that's actually benefiting and saving lives, but at the same time it's costing lives. I mean, what a predicament to have to write about.
There are
That's
a lot of,
interesting.
I'm writing an article now about all the dilemmas and
Yeah.
the problems. The more advanced things get, and the more dilemmas there are now with the using animals to transplant organs, which is
Right.
going to be a reality. It's
Yeah.
but incredible the advances. Like, for example, they have I mentioned in my book, they have a technique now which has expanded the pool of donors and also the time that a heart can be viable. It's called a heart in a box.
Yeah.
They have a box where the heart taken out of the donor can go inside this box, and it starts beating again because he gets perfused by blood, warm blood and everything,
Yeah.
and nutrients. So they can transport it like for 12 hours
Hmm.
instead of before it was like a little cooler with the heart. So you had 4 hours to put it into somebody else's chest.
Right.
Now it's 12 hours. This is a reality.
Yeah.
It's a new.
Yeah.
So you can ship them across the country. You can, if you have a heart that doesn't match anybody in your hospital, and you're in California, you can ship it to New York if there is a match there.
Yeah.
So incredible.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So I was fascinated by all these new advances, and also by the dilemmas, by the ethical
Yeah.
dilemmas that the doctors have to deal with while they're advancing this field.
Well, that and all, of course, all that is that makes this sort of storytelling even more interesting and gives you plenty of fodder for future stories. So I expect we'll start seeing a lot more of these books from you going forward. But for this one, this one is actually releasing on February 4th in hardcover, right?
Yes.
And I checked, and it is available actually as of January 21st if you pre-order the ebook. So if people want to rush ahead,
You
they
can
can do that.
pre-order everything now.
Yeah.
And it really helps me because obviously the pre-orders come out the first day. So if I have a lot of pre-orders, is it going to be successful launch?
Yeah.
But the 21st probably is the ebook that will be available. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. That's what happens. Usually it comes out a couple of weeks before the hardcover.
But officially February 4th.
February
Well,
4th.
that is we're gonna have to wrap up, but I've really enjoyed our time and I'm really looking forward to the book. I actually have a copy of the book. I've been reading it. I didn't get to finish reading it before the interview, but I'm enjoying it. So
Thank
well
you.
done. Where can people find more about you online? Where can they find you?
They can go to my webpage, www.CristinaLePort.com without an H.
Okay.
Maybe we can write it in the chat. I don't know if it's possible.
There will be some links. They'll find links in the show notes. So we got you covered. All right, Christina. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and good luck on this book and future books. I can't wait to see what else you come up with.
Well, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll do it again with
I'm
the
sure
next.
we will. Yeah, you got more books in you, so we'll be doing some more of these. For everyone else, those of you watching or listening, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. You know what's coming up next. We got a note at the end. You're not going to want to miss that. So stick around, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much.
You know, I've always believed life's too short for boring stories. So I write the kind of books I'd want to read. Action-packed, fast-paced fiction. Adventure stories with characters you'll wish you could hang out with. And twists you'll never see it coming. From ancient mysteries to modern day thrills, my books take you on a wild ride. And trust me, I've got plenty of rides to choose from. So if you're ready to escape into a world of danger, discovery, and intrigue, it's here waiting. Find your adventure at kevintumlinson.com/books. Not responsible for sleepless nights. Well, I hope you got, quite a bit out of that interview. As I said in the opening, I love talking to writers. And I've been thinking a lot about writing lately. That whole thing I was talking about earlier about, billing myself as the writer _. I was writing about that actually in my Substack recently. And this idea of, kind of treating it like a logo. I'm actually kind of figuring this part out as I go. And for some very important reasons, some of which I can't go into just yet. But the idea behind that cursor, that _, it's meant to be a cursor. And so I started looking into the history of the word cursor. And it comes from the Latin word cursor, which means it was the name given to these running messengers. It means runner or messenger. And if you know anything about history, especially from the Roman era, the Roman Empire era, they would send runners. If they had a message that needed to get somewhere with any sort of urgency, they would give that message to a runner. And sometimes that runner would just memorize the message so that it couldn't be intercepted. Or if there was a trust issue there, the emperor or the king or the official would do things like, they'd write that on a piece of papyrus or scroll, and they would have a wax seal on that. And that wax seal contained the, this crest or this symbol of that official. And, you could see whether the note had been opened and read based on whether or not that seal was broken. So, the idea of the cursor was that they ran ahead of the message. They were carrying the message with them as they went. And then, we use the term again, and then it comes up again and again through history in different forms. But once we got to the movable type era, the cursor became the name for a marker that showed where the next letter needed to be placed in order to do a print. And then from there, once we get to the typewriter age, it became the marker that was attached to the typewriter that traveled along as you would type each character and would indicate where the next character would be typed. And then fast forward to the digital age, some clever people needed a way to indicate to, if you were using a keyboard and typing on a screen, how do you know where that text is going to appear? And so they repurposed the term again. So a cursor became the little blinking line. Either it was horizontal or vertical, but it would trail ahead of the character. So you would type, there would be a blinking cursor at the end of what you typed, and that would indicate where the next letter was going to be typed. So you knew, I just typed the word writer. There's a cursor blinking at the end of that R. I need to hit the space bar so that I can type, the next word. Or I need to add an S or whatever you're going to do to add on to the word writer. And so, it evolved from there. And now there is the idea of the cursor is used interchangeably with that little icon that moves around on the screen when you move a mouse or trackpad. I actually feel like that's misnamed and that it's contextual, right? So it turns into a question mark, or it turns into a finger, or it turns into a light bulb, or a reticle, or whatever. It'll turn into whatever it needs to be to indicate the next function that happens when you click. I feel like that's misnamed because cursor has always been the messenger, right? It's always been the thing that kind of ran ahead of the message, while a mouse cursor tends to be all about interaction. all about manipulation. I think they're two different things. So I think we did ourselves a disservice in naming that thing a cursor. But this is not meant to be a treatise on cursors throughout history, the roots of that term or anything, or a history lesson. I just thought it was interesting as I've kind of evolved my branding and this engagement of the word, the writer, the phrase, the writer, to describe me. I recognized that term could apply to anybody, but by throwing the cursor on there, one, it differentiated that as a sort of brand and logo for me. This, by the way, this is what I call my Substack. My Substack is called The Writer, and the writer _ and all this thought has gone into this, but I felt like that cursor also indicated something essential to the idea of being a writer, which was writers. There's an adage: writers write and authors have written. I am both those things. The key is, like, I have written, I have books, I have posts. I am the author of those posts. I created those and they exist, and they're done. So in a sense, being an author is a complete system, a sealed system. Once you have written, then you are an author, and that never changes. But a writer, that is an ongoing thing. That's an active thing. Being a writer is it's like an active verb kind of scenario. And that's what I'm indicating with this blinking cursor. It means that it's not done yet, that I'm not done yet, that the work is just going to continue. So unfortunately for you, you don't get to steal that. I own that. And I've built a lot of branding around that, and continue to do so. But it doesn't matter, because the point really that I'm trying to make here is, like, that's my branding, that's my thing, whatever. But the concept, though, is applicable to all writers. You are a writer if you write. Writers write. You are an author if you have written. I think that for the majority of people that I encounter in this business, we refer to ourselves as authors. I'm an indie author. I'm a traditional author, I think that's accurate unless you have not yet written something. However, I think what we really mean by that is we are writers. And I think that for a time, I had kind of a hang up when it came to referring myself as a writer, because I wanted people to know instantly that what I wrote was novels. So, I could call myself a novelist. But then I would write nonfiction as well. And so I'm an author. And then I started thinking about, I write a lot of blog posts and newsletters and articles and things. And I could call myself the author of those things, but it doesn't make sense to the public, It doesn't have the same ring to it. But in that instance, I am the writer. It's an ongoing, continuous line of work that I'm generating. And it's a part of, it's just a part of who I am. It goes well beyond career and work. It's identity at that point. So I think for a lot of writers, that's the case. We have this growing industry of this growing community, really, of people. Like, I recently met up with Joe Solari here in Austin. Actually, he flew into town. We got a chance to have dinner, and he interviewed me for the Author Nation podcast, which I'm always happy to be a part of. We were talking about Author Nation. We were talking about what's going on to happen in the future with that conference and what's happening with the community surrounding that. And we recognize that there's some changes happening here. One of those is with the advent of things like with AI becoming like such a tool for being prolific. There are a lot of people out there who are just generating a bunch of books via AI and calling themselves authors. I think that's possibly fair to call yourself the author of that book if it was generated by an AI or even by a ghostwriter. I think you could make the case for that being true. But what I think you can't make the case for is you can't refer to yourself as a writer. And what I think is going to become important and a distinction is that there are those of us who write because we have no choice. Like, writing is the only option we have, because to not write is death. That's the way it starts to feel. When I write, I am accessing a different part of my psyche, my soul, than when I'm doing any other activity. And that part of me, it has to express itself or it starts to die. And I've entangled myself so much with that concept that I would likely die with it. So, anyway, that said, writers write because we have to write. I think that that's going to be a real distinction in publishing going forward. That's what I feel. I feel like there is no competition between writers, and there's no competition between writers and AI. I think that AI is going to own a slice of the publishing world and other parts of the creative world. And I think it's a little bit like the dog licking the pizza. That slice is your slice now, pup. Good boy. Go eat that pizza. But to me, that's no competition for me. That's not going to prevent me from having the life and career that I'm after, because I think that the reader is also going to be more prone to seek out the writer. So rather than worrying that AI is going to take our jobs, I think we should start worrying about whether or not we're giving this everything we can give it. Are we being the writer that we intend to be? And why are we doing it? Then there was another adage that, if you love something enough, you would do it for free. Not that you should do it for free, but that you would do it regardless of whether you got anything out of it because you love it. I think that's going to be a key differentiator as well. I think that writers are going to, we're kind of going to get into an era where we're writing because we can't do anything else. I heard something today. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it, and I may butcher this as a concept, but it was the idea that the problem for most of us when it comes to success is that we have a choice. As long as we have a choice, then we're open to failure. And what he meant by that is that the people who really succeed, the people who overcome any obstacle and any odds and actually go on to just a spectacular, successful life, they didn't give themselves a choice. It was on or off. It was do or die. And I think you can find plenty of examples of this. Some of the greatest minds in our history came to this conclusion that it was either create this thing or nothing. Now, whether or not they would have bounced back had they been unable to do that, whether they could have kept going, it's all up for debate. But I don't think there's any question that in order for you to be excellent, you cannot give yourself a choice to be anything but excellent. You study. That's why we tend to study athletes, or warriors. If you look at the guys who get through like Hell Week and everything in like special forces training, that sort of thing, those guys, Navy SEALs, and those guys, like they don't have an option. It's this or you're washed out, right? I think there's something to that, and you can push yourself too hard. Absolutely, you can get to a breaking point. But I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit. I think that most of us think that our breaking point it's like a Dunning-Kruger effect. I think we sometimes underestimate and occasionally overestimate our capabilities. But I think when it comes to what we can bear as creators, as humans, as as whatever we are, I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit. I think we can probably accomplish much more than we think we can. I'm starting to learn that about myself. I've talked about this on the show before and in Substack posts and elsewhere that, I kind of got to a breaking point. I kind of got to this scenario where I felt overwhelmed and burnt out, and I had like an existential crisis, and I became okay with the thought that maybe I would die. Maybe I'm going away. I for some reason became okay with that. But I think that now, because of that experience and because of working through it and overcoming it, you build that resilience. And you hear this from people all the time, like going through that stuff. You go through the fire, you build some resilience because of that. I think because of that whole experience, and because I came to this point where I like could no longer lie to myself and could no longer fall for my own BS, suddenly I grew, I evolved. And out of that evolution is a new me who is still anxious sometimes and still stressed, still sad occasionally, still angry occasionally, but is much better adapted to get a grip and deal with that and overcome it. And instead of constantly giving in to the impulse to lash out or to fold in on myself, quit, give up, walk away, whatever, I'm gaining that inner strength to just kind of keep going. Will I fail again? Well, will I come to a low point again in my life? Maybe. But the point is to know that every time I've ever hit rock bottom, I've also climbed back up. And that's not a testament to any inner strength of my own. It's a testament to the inner strength of humanity itself. We are capable of, once we get to our lowest low, scaling back up and going high again. That's a human trait. That's nothing to admire in a Kevin Tumlinson. That's something to admire in you and everyone you've ever known, every living soul you've ever encountered. We can do that. We have that ability. That's God working in us. That's my opinion. I actually don't think it's opinion. I think it's fact, but your views may vary. So anyway, I think that's going to have to wrap us up. I hope you got something out of this note at the end and out of the interview with our guest. And I hope that you, I hope you subscribe. I hope that you comment. I hope that you share this video with others. And I hope that you are having just a blessed and amazing life. I know there's some things going on in the world, scary things, hopeful things also. But you know something? Everything always works out for the best. I know it's not hard. That's not easy to hear when you're in the middle of it. But if you look back at your life, you're going to see that that's true. So take some hope, because it doesn't matter what's going on right now. What matters is this too shall pass. So take care of yourselves. I'm glad you're here. Love all of you. And I'll see you next time.
Wordslinger.